Hello, everyone. Welcome to session one of the Bebop Rewatch. We're very excited to be here, and we're delighted that you've joined us as well. So, thank you for coming along and welcome to those of you who are finding us for the first time. What we're going to do here, as we discussed on the introduction episode, is we're going to be rewatching the entire series of Cowboy Bebop, the seminal anime TV show, and we're going to be breaking it down episode by episode and giving you our thoughts on that. So to do that with us, we have, of course, my homeboy Rich Kid. Rich Kid, say what's up.
What's up, people? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a wicked ride. And we've got for our first guest, well, the only person we could have for our first guest, really, like we couldn't start this without bringing along our cohort from Wulong Talks, the big man, Big A, the Manc Geek from up north. Say what's up, Big A.
What's up, peeps?
Yeah, man. So yeah, the house is full. We're good to go. So let's crack on into it, boys. So the episode that we're looking at today is the first episode that ever aired of Cowboy Bebop. It's called Asteroid Blues, and straight away from this episode, you get like a real kind of sense of what this show is going to be about and the kind of things that they're going to do with this show. It said right off the bat, you get the different genres that they're dealing with. You get the kind of classic sci-fi elements, plus you get the Western elements thrown in. You get a lot of action movie references thrown in, and there's tons of like kind of Easter eggs and little hidden things about the show that you get from this first episode. And this is something that like anime shows are very good at. They're very good at, from the very first episode, kind of foreshadowing the things that are going to come. So what we'll be doing is be chatting a little bit about that. But first of all, I mean, guys, like obviously we all know this series. We've watched it many times. In Richard's case, probably so many times that his disc is broken. But what did you feel when you first started that first episode? Because it begins in a very specific way as well. It begins with that montage of kind of a shootout between Spike and some other guys. We don't know who those guys are, and we don't really know who Spike is at this point. We're just kind of given that first set of images. So, what was your first kind of thoughts when you see that? I mean, obviously, bearing in mind that you're watching this not as somebody who's seen the show several times before, but as a newcomer. What were kind of the things that stood out for you in that opening? And I'll toss that one over to you, Rich.
Oh, to me, yeah. um, I just remember just thinking to myself like, this just looks fucking beautiful. That was number one. It was beautiful. I mean, like the opening montage, you have to let them know, Jay, is also in black and white. So I see it in black and white, and I'm just like, number one, this looks different. This doesn't look like usually when you have a flashback in anime, like it's just normal, just like is an actual flashback, and then it's just some voiceover. Yeah, and then they came in, and then they killed my master, and it's just like, no, wait a minute. It's a montage in black and white, beautifully shot as well. That's what it is. I mean, like it looks. I mean, this is going to be something that's going to be something that all of us are going to be saying throughout the whole show, throughout every single episode. It looks like a film, like a beautifully shot film. So you've got this beautifully shot montage with like angles, like I said, that you don't normally find in anime, in black and white, which isn't usually a normal trope when they do flashbacks for this, um, with just some melancholic like piano. Is it piano music or like a music box jam happening over the top, which is the complete opposite to what's actually happening on screen. And the best way I can describe it um, is something that John Woo's done at least more than once, but I won't reference the first one. I'm sure Jay could tell you what song is playing. But the one I remember is basically in Face Off when when somebody's house gets attacked, or Castor Troy's house gets attacked, and he's got a daughter. And while they're having a shootout, the guy who's looking after the daughter doesn't want her to hear the gunshots, so he puts the headphones over her ears, and it's playing somewhere over the rainbow by Judy Garland. And it's just those two complete opposites. And I just remember just seeing this on screen. So you've got that the black and white montage, the music box music playing, beautifully shot angles, and just going, I need to fucking watch this. There's not like already from that point onwards, I knew I hadn't seen anything like this in animation form, and I was just hooked. That's the first time I can say when I saw that scene.
Yeah, it's very, very evocative. The kind of from the get-go. And as said, what I like about it as well is the fact that they don't really tell you anything about who is in that scene. It's just kind of, it's there, and you know there's a significance for it being there, but they're not going to tell you straight off the bat why it's happening. It's something that they said that they foreshadow very well, and it's something that, you know, Cowboy Bebop does very well, and it's something like it said that anime in general seems to do very well. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's exactly like a movie. Alf, how about you? Like, what were the kind of the first things you took away from that opening scene?
Yeah, I remember seeing it and not knowing like what the hell, like how that was important or why it would be important at the time. Obviously, later on you do go on to find out, but just kind of like, you know, understanding that it was a flashback of some sort of flashbacks and little bits and pieces of like kind of like moments, feelings, and emotions, and then, you know, the dropping of the roles and then it going from black and white to color. You just knew kind of like it was significant in a way and would get all that filled in at some point, but at that moment in time you weren't aware as to how or to how it was related. So it was kind of, it was just kind of giving you a little taster, but then obviously like later on obviously we get to learn a lot more, but it kind of makes you stick with it because you're like, okay, now I want to know kind of like more about what this character is like, their past is all about and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just a really good use of just making you go what, so you just stick with it, you know what I mean? It was just such a good kind of like little intro, because I mean they could have easily just gone straight into the episode, but it just gives you a little bit of intrigue before you get into it, and then you're just there for the ride.
Yeah, definitely, man. Some very strong, like John Woo vibes coming off of that introduction, as Richard said as well. You know, really, really strong John Woo vibes. It feels like something taken from, you know, one of his movies. So it definitely kind of sets the tone straight away for what, you know, what one of the things this series will be about, I guess. And it's, as Rich said, it's just beautifully shot as well. It's beautifully animated. So it's very, very kind of striking. And what I liked as well, Rich, was the as that scene comes to an end where the rose drops into the puddle, the picture slowly kind of refocuses and then becomes color. So the actual petals, like one by one, start to become red, and it you know, the whole scene and the whole panel that is presented there slowly kind of fills up with color as the music kind of comes to a crescendo, and it's just like a piece of art, really. Like when you watch that scene, it's amazing the way that they've done that, and it was a very, very clever way to kind of start the show. So yeah, man, we got off to a real flyer with that episode, and then of course you get that theme music by Yoko Kanno for the first time, and you hear that, and you know, the seatbelts just jamming like crazy, and that is just like, I mean, even people that I know that aren't big fans of Cowboy Bebop, I don't know why they're not big fans of Cowboy Bebop. That's like an odd thing, but even people who don't like Cowboy Bebop love the theme music. And the music in general on the actual show is just unbelievable, the work that Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts do with that soundtrack, and we'll get into that more and more as, you know, we start going through the episodes, listeners. But definitely, I mean, if you just track down the soundtrack alone, even if you don't want to watch the show, just listen to the soundtrack. It is absolutely amazing. So as the episode kind of goes on and we get past the theme music, we're then kind of first sort of introduced to Spike Spiegel, the character, who is, I guess you would say, that the main character of the story. Although one of the great things about this series is it does take time to properly introduce you to everybody and to fill out everybody's backstory, although it does it in a non-linear way. So again, it's not necessarily that, you know, from the very beginning you're going to be told all the details about who these characters are. You get it kind of piece by piece as the series goes on. But it's amazing the way that Spike is introduced. So Rich, tell us a little bit about that first scene.
Hold on. So the first scene, this is basically when we meet them. Well, hold on. We meet Spike training, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, like Jesus. Like once again, like it comes down to the type of animation that's been done, like in this scene, and like when you think back to the other type of anime that was being released at that point, everything else was quite close up or mid shot, and everything's like quite fast paced. There was no sense of any form of making it feel anything more than an anime. That's how everything else felt. And then you see like this scene, and it looks like it's been filmed. So I basically listened to the commentary with the two guys from Japan, or for the original copy, who did the voice for Spike and did the voice for Jet. And this is the thing that they said. They said that when they were given the scripts, they were allowed to ad lib a little bit, but they were told not to do the voices as if they were like doing a show or doing a voiceover or anything like that. They were just basically like, just imagine as if you are actually just talking. So you're just like, so you've got this paper in front of you, but we need to stick to it as close as possible, but at the same time, just let it come as natural as possible. And so you've got the voiceover, like, when they're speaking like that, and then you've just got this scene of like Spike just training, no top on. This is the homoerotic part kicking in now. So like no top on, pants, and he's just basically just going through some cartons. And the other thing as well is that he doesn't look like other anime characters from that period. He's not 6 foot whatever and buff with tattoos or scars or anything. He's a very, very lean character, and just, if anything, actually normal looking and on the bit of the skinny side as well. So already you've been introduced to this character, and you know that he's kind of dangerous, but at the same time he's kind of laid back when it comes to this conversation that happens between him when Jet comes to talk to him. But the lighting of the scene where he's training is almost, it's somewhat similar to the opening montage, but it's done in blue and black, and it just makes it feel like a film noir or a tech noir film. Like, and it imagines that it looks like something that might have come out from like Blade Runner. But
Mm.
I mean, it's a beautiful scene, especially when you see him do the kick, and he just does the kick, and he just kind of like does like a semicircle or a circle around his foot, just in slow motion. If anything, the best way to describe it for anybody who hasn't seen it, there's a scene in Enter the Dragon where Bruce Lee's in his room and he's doing like these jumping high kicks, and then somebody comes in and tells him to fight, and Bruce basically does like a 180 turn with his foot still in the air at the same point, and then points it to the person at the door and goes outside. That scene is basically, just an homage to that Bruce Lee scene that you see in
Mm.
Cowboy Bebop.
Mm. Yeah, that's the kind of vibe I got from it as well. I got that kind of strong kind of Bruce Lee slash martial arts movie vibe and reference to that particular scene when you meet him as well. And it says a lot about his character in an odd way, because it explains kind of his serenity, but to the point of almost being like numb in a way,
Yeah, yeah.
to his surroundings. And again, it kind of foreshadows a lot of what we're going to learn about Spike, both as a physical person, in terms of his experience and the things that he's gone through physically, but also the kind of mental state that he has. So yeah, it really kind of opens those doors for you. And then, as Richard said, we get to meet Jet for the first time, Jet Black, who we find out from there is the captain of the ship that they're on board, which is called the Bebop, which the show is after. And there's a really nice kind of back and forth between Jet and Spike, which again is like huge foreshadowing for what's to come, and is a very, very funny scene as well. Alvin, do you remember that introduction scene between the two of them and the chat about bell peppers and beef?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because it's just they work together. They're cowboys, bounty hunters, but they're two quite different guys. And I think like that scene kind of says to you kind of like how different they actually are. And also the whole peppers and beef kind of like joke. That just lets you know that, what, they mess up sometimes in their job. There's high costs. They have to pay for things, for damages and stuff like that, and they have no money. You know what I mean? They do a hard job, but whatever they do earn, they earn very little of. So there isn't actually any beef in the bell peppers and beef. So
Mm.
it's just like you just get an idea that life is hard for them, you know what I mean? And you just get it. And if you've seen, like, it's funny, you said Serenity earlier, but if you've seen like Firefly, and obviously shipping that, it's called Serenity, it's a similar kind of thing. It's like they work for things, they work for money, they do these jobs, but then they get little out of it. So it's like, why are you still doing it? But they still do whatever they need to do. But kind of like life is hard, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was just like a nice kind of like little. You kind of feel bad for them because we're like going, okay, well they're doing all this stuff, but nothing really comes of it for them, you know what I mean? And then obviously, because it's world building, we get the bounties come in and whatnot.
Mm.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah,
well, I think. Oh, sorry, carry on. No,
no, I was just going to say that you're absolutely spot on with the Firefly reference there as well, because that actually, yeah, now I think about it, that's a really good kind of point of reference for the whole series as a whole, because as you said, this is a show where the heroes don't always win. They make mistakes, things go wrong for them. And as you said, there are consequences for the decisions that they make as well. Which is another thing that is so strong about this show is the writing and the way that they're able to kind of pay off a lot of the decisions that these characters make. And that, again, in this show and in this episode in particular, really kind of brings home the idea that not everything is glamorous and glitzy, and these heroes are not perfect people. They're kind of messed up, and as said, you kind of find out more about that as the show goes along. But sorry, Rich, I just cut you off, but go on, mate.
Oh yeah, no, I was basically just gonna say that, where it's just like, it's almost, there's always going to be that whole notion that anything that's drawn or any form of animation is for kids. But like you said, you just see that scene, and like this is the real world. Like I said, there's a lot of animes that were coming out at that point, and you watch film. I mean, like the most popular at that point that my brother used to watch was Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball. And you've just got these characters that just charge up and they're always becoming better. And then you've got things like Pokemon, where Ash can catch every single thing. And then you watch like Cowboy Bebop, and essentially it's the first scene where the first conversation they have is about them being broke. That's real fucking life. It's like there's certain things that you see from the montage into this scene that this isn't a show for kids. And that's when I rewatched the episode, and when I look back, I remember getting that notion, and I think because I saw it, I didn't see it too young. I saw it like in my early 20s, and so I could kind of relate to that whole thing, because you don't know what you're fucking doing, and certain times when you're younger, money's more frivolous, and it's easy to get, but there's certain days when you're kind of broke and you're like, right, well, boy, what can I eat? Okay, well, let's do this. And then I like the fact that it wasn't anything special. It was just like a day-to-day thing, and it just happens to be about a meal. But the other thing that I did clock on about that whole conversation is that it kind of relates to a lot of one of the themes that runs throughout the show as well, and relates to not just the main characters, but to multiple characters that you might meet along. And it's the whole thing of lying. And it's this whole, you understand, it's this whole thing of lying. So it's the whole thing of like, yeah, we've got beef and bell peppers. You've got two partners on the ship. We don't know how long they've been together, but from what we can gather, we know they've been together for a certain amount of time, and just the way how they act with each other, and and invade, and they're able to invade each other's personal space within a certain degree. And it's this whole thing of like, he could have just said, yeah, we've got noodles, we've got this. And the thing is, Jet is telling a lie about there being beef in the noodles, but not out of spite, but because he wants to be nice. So that gives another hint as to the way that these two have a relationship. Like, they've been together long enough for one person to care about what the other person may feel like. And the only time that person breaks and actually tells the truth and says, well, listen, the reason why we don't have beef is because you did this and you did that and you did this. He could have just said that from the get-go, but you can see that he wants to try and spare his feelings and wants it to be a perfect life, but he does it the wrong way. He opens with a lie. So like I said, but that's another thing that runs throughout this whole show. So that's another thing that I clocked on as well.
And it harkens back as well to the point you were making earlier about the maturity of the show itself, and the content of it, and the fact that whilst I wouldn't necessarily say it's not for kids, I would say it's more it's certainly more complex than the average kind of, you know, anime show that you get in general, in terms of its characterization and the way that it's going to treat these characters as well. It's going to treat them like adults, you know, which is really kind of fascinating to get that vibe so early on in the show. So as the episode goes on, we get to find out, as we've talked about, that these guys are bounty hunters, as Big A mentioned, and basically they're broke. They got no money, so they're going to have to get a bounty in order to kind of get themselves some money, basically, and get some real beef. The show kind of quickly sets up that we're out in the future at the moment, and humans are able to travel off world. So we have these two characters based on their ship, the Bebop, out in space, and from there you kind of get the sense of where the technology is at, and the fact that they're able to travel to different planets that all seem to have been kind of colonized with humans, and asteroid belts as well, which is where the name comes from. And then, as said, they discover that being bounty hunters, there is a bounty available on one of these asteroids for a character called Asimov Solensen, who the show kind of reveals is a member of a syndicate. And again, we don't really get too much detail about what the syndicate is, but it's one of those things that they are foreshadowing again for explanation sort of later on down the road. So you kind of have to be patient with it, listeners, and kind of buy into the story at this point. And then a lot of those kind of questions get answered in due course. But we get to find out, as said, that this bounty is available. So they go to travel to an asteroid. And the asteroid, interestingly, is called Tijuana. And those of you listening from America will obviously know that Tijuana is down south from you guys in Mexico, and is a pretty famous Mexican town as well. Well, city, I guess, really is a more accurate way of describing it. But it's pretty famous, Tijuana, for being kind of like a wild West town. And when they arrive down there, or when Spike first arrives down on Tijuana, you get a real sense of it being like a Western town. But what they do quite cleverly is there's quite a heavy Asian influence as well. So even though in terms of, you know, the flora and fauna and the buildings and things like that looking like the kind of, you know, the kind of places you'd find in a typical Western, there is a lot of kind of Asian writing on the buildings. You know, there's a lot of people walking around on the surface of the asteroid who obviously live there and inhabit it and work there. And you get, as said, a real sense that this has become like a kind of melting pot. So obviously people have been here for quite some time. What did you guys make of like Tijuana, the asteroid, and the way that it was set out? Because I thought it was just like so clever to kind of set, you know, the part of the story on an asteroid that kind of almost looks like Earth. But was there anything that kind of stood out for you? Alf, you can go first.
Yeah, it kind of used to confuse me watching it. It took me quite a while to realize, like, yeah, the whole kind of like amalgamation of kind of cultures thing is really cool in that. But like, I remember noticing that there were kind of like buildings in the sky and that kind of, and I didn't. My brain like didn't quite get like why. I thought, wait, is that reflection? Why is there no actual sky? Why does it look like there's kind of like buildings on top of like where the sky would be or whatever? And then that's when like I began to realize that it's kind of like a generation ship, how like it's cylindrical on the inside, so obviously all around is the entire city around it. So that's why like it's like they don't explain that to you. You just kind of have to figure that out. And it took me a long time to realize that there's like no actual horizon. It's just like cylindrical on the inside. Like, for example, a better way to explain it would probably be Interstellar. Like, you know how there's those ships at the end of the movie, and it's like there is no horizon, and you've got that fake sun and that, and it's all going around on the inside. That's what it's like. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of like old design. There's a lot of recognizable stuff in there. So it's not too futuristic, but then designs of some cars are like quite futuristic. There's the occasional like ship flying about and all that. But it's all kind of very it's not it's not so fantastical that like you don't get it. You know what I mean? It's grounded enough so you get it, and then there's a few things here and there that are like kind of fantastical, but it doesn't go down the it's more down the used future kind of used tech kind of look over anything else.
Yeah, that's what I like about it, is the way that they've kind of married present technology for the time. Bearing in mind, listeners, that this show was first made in the late 90s. It has that same kind of feel to the technology that you see around you, and the ways in which we envisaged sort of future technology back in that time period. It really kind of encapsulates that, whilst also kind of grounding it, as you said, so that it feels like, even though you're not on Earth, you are still in a part of Earth, and Earth problems still exist within this world, as we'll get to. Richie, we also got our first look at Spike's iconic ship. So I'm gonna let you wax lyrical about the swordfish for a minute.
The swordfish is fucking cool. Like it's just a fucking jam. Is you know what it is? Because you can look at. I mean, first of all, okay, no. So we're talking about like the swordfish, but you can almost look at the swordfish and also look at like just the way, compare it the same way how you guys were just talking about how everything looks, whereas like everything looks the same. It reminds me of let's say, for anybody that can't kind of like piece what it looks like. There's a bit in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 where you see the bit where Ego is trying to play catch with Peter Quill, and he basically says, okay, you got to think of something, and he's able to make the magical ball. And then it also reminds me of like an issue of Thor where Eric Masterson goes to Hell to fight against Mephisto to get Thor's soul out of a bag that is captured. And Doctor Strange gives him this weapon, but the weapon's formless. And he's like, I just want you to think of something that you'll be able to handle. So, and Eric Masterson can think of a gun. He can't think of anything else, like, because it's only the imagination of what his mind can think of. So he has to be able to envision it and think it for it to be. And when you look at like everything that you see on the screen, when I first saw it, it didn't actually stand out to me because it was just so close to something where it's like, yeah, well, that probably makes sense anyway. There's a fucking building on it, floating there, whatever. Like it just felt so rooted that would be the next step, that I didn't even question it until on repeated viewing. And so like when you see the swordfish, you've got basically this ship, bright red ship that looks like a swordfish, and it's actually one of the most colorful things that you've seen so far in an episode. And then you see Spike sitting in it, and he's not sitting in it like a normal like spaceship type of thing. He's actually almost straddling it like a motorcycle. So I just remember just thinking to myself, like, how cool, or how much cooler can this show fucking get? And take into account we're only 5 minutes in, so we've already got this place that looks sci-fi but isn't sci-fi, and it looks like the type of place that you could be like, well, I can imagine actually going here. And then you've got this ship which just looks sleek as hell, and not only do you fly it, no, but you ride it like a motorcycle. That's all I remember. Like I just see, and like I said, then going back and watching the episodes and just seeing those two things again. This could be, this could be like fucking 100 years from now. If this shit was around, it wouldn't surprise me. It just feels very, very grounded. But all of those things, and I think they made a really, really good shout for showing us the architecture and also showing us basically the kind of vehicles that they'd be using. Because we've already been introduced to the Bebop, which is basically a freighter ship. And then they're introduced to another ship which isn't on the ground but is airbase, and obviously at some point has to hit the ground. And that looks slick. And then you're introduced to like the living quarters and the actual way how that part of society is set up. And I just remember just thinking to myself, like, it's just fucking perfect.
Yeah, it is, man. It's a real dope addition to the show for sure. And the swordfish, listeners, is if you don't know, it's the red, quite slim ship that you see a lot in the show. You see it a lot in the artwork floating around the internet and stuff as well. And it's become a real iconic kind of vehicle, a very iconic anime vehicle, along with the many that are out in the genre. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And as said, what kind of stood out to me was the fact that you touched on, which was that he rides it like a motorcycle. So it's almost like he's coming into, to town on his Harley Davidson. And I love that. I love that kind of reference that they've put in there. So with the kind of introduction and with Spike arriving at Tijuana, we get then introduced to some of the other characters from the episode. We first meet the 3 old men, who are, I think, recurring characters throughout the series.
Yeah, I've actually got names for them. Sorry, so when you're ready.
Oh, you have? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Give us the names.
Okay, so the names are I can't tell you who's who, but the names are Antonio, Carlos, Yobin. And this is some fucking cool trivia. Like, listeners have to take into account that this is our first show on one of the shows that we actually love talking about. So it may feel a little bit boring, but trust me, everything we're going to be telling you is fucking worth it. All right, so the 3 old men. So one's called Antonio, one's called Carlos, one's called Jobin. And he was a Brazilian composer, pianist, songwriter, arranger, and singer. And obviously, one of the things that we have mentioned is that the love of music is something which plays a very, very big part in the show. So basically, those 3 characters who seem to do nothing, but at some point they do something, is actually named after somebody which I'm sure either Shinichiro Watanabe or Yoko Kanno definitely look up to. And that's another sneaky way of getting music, whether it be music itself, or a song title, or the name of a singer or a writer into the show. And if you know, you know, and if you don't, then that's your bad. So that's a beautiful piece of like trivia to throw in there as well.
For sure, man, for sure. So yeah, I mean, as you said, we get to meet those characters, the 3 old men, and their hilarious conversation as well, which is just brilliantly realized because it's just like a typical old man conversation. I think one of them is moaning about how he basically has to pay for the other 2 all the time, and yeah, it's just like it's really, really well kind of played out. And then we first get introduced to the villain of the piece as well. As said, the character Asimov Solensen. He's accompanied by a woman, a pregnant woman called Katerina as well. And, you're quickly kind of introduced to what he is about and why there's a bounty on his head. And it seems he seems to be dealing in a drug, which I think is called Red Eye. I can't remember. Yeah, I think it is Red Eye, isn't it? Yeah. And the Red Eye drug seems to be something that's like an enhancer almost. It enhances your natural abilities, I guess, is the best way to put it. So it increases kind of your strength and your stamina and things like that. And this is a very kind of black market thing. As the episode kind of goes on, you find out that he's come into supply of all of this along with Katerina because they stole it from the syndicate that they work for. And so he's obviously trying to sell it off very quickly to make himself a fast buck so that they can go to Mars and settle down on Mars and things like that. So you get a real kind of quick sense of what those characters are about as well. And one of the cool things that I did note was that Asimov obviously is named after the sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov. The author Isaac Asimov, which I thought was a very cool nod. Katerina, I'm not too sure about. I did try and look it up, but there wasn't really much information about Katerina, where that may have come from necessarily. But yeah, that was really, really cool. That was a nice nod. As soon as I found out his name, I was like, oh my god, yeah, it's Asimov. So it shows you kind of already how much the makers of the show and the writers are fans of these things and how they've been able to kind of incorporate that into the show. We get a great demonstration of what Red Eye does as well, because there's this awesome scene which is a shootout in the bar that they're in. Well, I guess it's more like a cantina, isn't it? It's more like a kind of Western cantina. And yeah, as said, the way that it's kind of framed and shot is just absolutely brilliant. Alv, what did you make of like that first kind of action scene for kind of setting the tone of what the series is about and the way that it was kind of shot. Did it kind of remind you of any movies that you've seen or anything like that?
Well, I kind of see it more like a bit subversive in a way, because usually when there's like any kind of shootout, it would focus on just the actual shootout itself, whereas getting to see the what was going on from Asimov's point of view while he was enhanced, it kind of added an extra layer to it, especially like moments where like there's one guy who runs up to and like takes the gun out of his hand and shoots him in the head. There's another guy who the bullet's coming directly towards him and he like ducks under it and dodges it and stuff like that. So it kind of because it puts you in his shoes, that's kind of the more interesting part of the shootout. Like all the bullets flying about and all that is cool and everything, but what he does is kind of really the focus. And then like that's when you really understand as to like what the drug is capable of doing in someone's hands like his.
Yeah, definitely so, definitely so. And one interesting thing I did find out as well about Tijuana and about this scene in particular is that the makers of the show were big fans of Robert Rodriguez's films, and in particular Desperado. And what they wanted to do was to model Asimov on Antonio Banderas's character from that, the mariachi. So like when you look at his face, you actually see he kind of looks a little bit like Antonio Banderas did in that movie, and he's got the same hairstyle and things like that. And that shootout scene was supposed to be like their version of the shootout in the cantina in Desperado. So it was their kind of take on it and their homage to it. And yeah, I say they did a pretty damn good job, man. Because like when I was watching it, that's kind of the first thing I thought of was like, yeah, this is kind of like Desperado in a way. Like, you know, if you want to leave, you can leave.
But if you want to stay, you can stay. You know what? You know what? That film has to be seen at some point this week or this weekend. I'm sorry.
Definitely,
open up a whole new thing.
we've got to do a Desperado watch as well at some point. So look out for that one, listeners. We're going to do that too. But yeah, I mean that scene was just brilliant the way it was kind of done and put together. And again, it shows you like how skilled these animators are and how great a director Watanabe is as well to kind of knit all of those scenes together and in the way that he does, and to kind of play it out with that homage is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So we get on from there to a little bit more kind of plot and exposition. We learn that, as said, Asimov is a dealer of this substance, Red Eye. And, you know, Spike, when he first confronts Katerina, he actually manages to steal some food from Katerina that she's got from a vending machine without her looking, because as is a running joke throughout this episode, Spike's belly is always rumbling, which is kind of giving up the ghost a little bit, giving up the game a little bit for what he wants to do. And that's quite a funny scene as well, because you get a nice sense of who Katerina is and what her kind of objectives are, you know, which is basically just to get the hell out of this place and this life. And then as you see, she appears to be pregnant. So you're thinking, you know, she obviously wants to start a life somewhere where she and Asimov can be happy and raise their family. Spike's kind of interaction with Asimov, though, was really cool. I mean, I like the way that Spike just really doesn't give a shit about Asimov when he realizes that the bounty on him is so small. He kind of dismisses him as a weak nobody, really, and a small fry. And, you know, I love that because, again, it kind of foreshadows like Spike's character, his arrogance and the way that he kind of deals with people, but it's not even necessarily an arrogance built out of overconfidence. It's just an arrogance built out of his melancholy and the fact that he just doesn't really care that much about anyone or anything, certainly at that point. What did you think of like that kind of back and forth between him and Katerina, and then with Asimov as well? Alv, you can go first.
Yeah, so character-wise, it kind of gives us the information like more character depth to both Asimov and Katerina. Just because before that we really aren't quite sure as to like why they're doing, and you kind of do like sympathize with them a little bit, just because you know they just want to get away and go to Mars and have a life together. And it's just, you kind of do feel, especially when you get to the end, you kind of do feel a little bad about it. But things aren't necessarily always as black and white as we assume they are. So it definitely gives them some depth, because they're not just like your standard kind of anime antagonists. They're actual, they've got hopes and dreams and wants as well, just like anyone else. So it does humanize them quite a bit. Although what they're doing is against the law and bad and whatnot.
Yeah, very much so. Richie, how about you, man?
Yeah, no, I definitely have to agree with both of what you said, and definitely what you said, Alvin, is that the thing that this episode and this whole show is able to do so well, and it's something that another thing that we're going to keep on coming back to, I think, is that how it's able to tell a story without having to tell you everything that happened in the beginning. So you do kind of feel sorry for Katerina and Asimov, like that, like I said, there's a sympathy where I imagine them being like a Bonnie and Clyde gone wrong. Like the relationship was never like this at the beginning. Like the relationship was like, okay, we've both been in the game for ages, and we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this one last big score, and then that never really came along. And then when it finally does come along, and they do have this thing, I can imagine that's when Asimov gets addicted to his own drug that he's actually trying to peddle as well. And the only thing that's keeping him sane is Katerina. And then obviously at this point you think she's pregnant, so you're like, oh, so there's a bit more sympathy where she's like, she does love this man, but obviously she might only be in love with this man because she's pregnant as well. And then she has this run on a Spike, and then you just see this, and this is another theme that runs throughout the show as well. It's moments. There's a reason why we're not told everything about anybody from the beginning. And I remember reading an interview with Shinichiro Watanabe, and he said that the reason he loved this show and the reason how he starts it, and how he ends the show, how he ends it, is because that's how life is. So you might be friends with somebody that somebody in primary school that you were at 5 years old, and they were your best friend, and then that person might have got up and left for whatever reason. His family got up and moved country, and you never saw that person again. That's a moment in your life that you will have. You might not ever know what happened to this person. You might not even know just the beginning of that person, but you will have a little chapter that you can always tell. And that's the thing that I love that you're getting in this episode, and it's the first episode, because it's not something that's usually done. Usually from the first episode we're told everything about this person or everything about everybody that appears in a show, but it's the running theme where, like with Katerina and Asimov, you can tell already that they've been through some shit, and there's a reason why there's a bounty on their head, and they're falling on hard times. And so when she does have this run into the Spike, once again it comes down to moments, and it's that little fleeting moments that they have where to a certain degree you're just like, oh, this could potentially be a love interest, and you get that feeling that she's looking at him going like, wow, like, I'm pregnant, this guy, he's a bit of a cheeky scoundrel, but he's kind of cute. They have that back and forth banter, and it just makes you think like, oh, like this could be something special. And that's basically what I get from me and Asimov and Katerina, and seeing how they interact with each other, and then obviously seeing the interaction between Spike and Katerina, and it's just that thing. It's just moments. So yeah, I just that's what I got from those scenes.
And it's interesting as well, because like the way that as you said, the way that scene kind of plays out, you get the impression almost that it's that there is a connection between Katerina and Spike, but ultimately when it comes down to it, Spike is about his bounty. So yeah. Like it kind of makes you think like, how far would Spike have gone if things had developed and escalated between the two of them? Would he have kind of pursued Katerina in that way, or would he care more about the money and getting the bounty and getting the job done? And that mystery is never really solved in this episode, but and it goes back to kind of what you were saying about like moments and about life, and how life is like moments. These things are fleeting, and sometimes you do have that connection with a person and it never really comes through because life will throw something else in the way. And in this case, you know, it's the fact that obviously she's a wanted criminal, and Spike's got a bounty that he needs to collect. So even though, you know, there may have been this thing between them, you always know, as a viewer, you're always aware that, you know, surely this can't go anywhere because he's going to want to get that money. He's going to want to get that bounty under. So it's a really, again, kind of clever and well realized kind of scene that really tells you a lot about Spike and his character. We also get, obviously, Jet being introduced in this scene as well. He arrives at the bar and he's able to obtain some information from two members of the syndicate, who have obviously come to track down the drugs that they've stolen. And the way he kind of handles both of them guys just makes me laugh, and it says to you as well, this is a man who's serious about his business. And it's kind of the contrast between them as well, between Spike and Jet, is quite apparent in this scene as well, because Spike, you get the impression, would probably try and have a bit of fun with both of these guys, maybe take the piss out of them a little bit, beat them around a little bit, and show off a bit as well, to show how much better he is than them. But with Jet, it's just kind of smash mouth and, listen, just give me what I came here for. Like, I'm not interested in anything. Just tell me why we're here, you know? So it's a good kind of setup. I really, really enjoyed that as well. And one of the kind of shocking moments of the episode comes soon after that, when Asimov and Katerina are trying to get away from the syndicate. And Katerina, as she's boarding one ship that they've hijacked, appears to get shot in the stomach, and you're thinking, oh my god, like this is crazy, you know? How could an anime show like go that deep? They've shot this woman, this pregnant woman, in her stomach, and then the next thing you see is all these vials of red eye falling out from her stomach, and you realize, like, they've been having us on the whole time. She's not pregnant at all. She's just carrying all of these drugs underneath her dress. And that was, I absolutely loved that. I thought that was so clever. Just brilliant the way that they kind of did that. How did you feel about that, Alvin? Were you like surprised when that shot happens and that all the drugs come spilling out?
Well, yeah, it's a great reveal, because I literally was not expecting it at all. You know what I mean? So it's just that thing of they never really drew attention to it. You know what I mean? They never kind of hinted at it that would be the case. So when that kind of happens, you're kind of impressed with the kind of clever ruse. You know what I mean? That she hit it that way, or they hit it that way, and it's just a bit of a shock. You're like, oh, that's actually kind of smart, but and also it's just smart storytelling as well, because like Rich said earlier, we don't have all the information. You know what I mean? There could have easily been a scene, for example, if someone else had written the show, where we see them plan that, you know what I mean, and we see them put it into action. But doing it this way, where we have no idea and then it's revealed, is just smart writing, and it's just another thing for you to kind of like be surprised by this story that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Rich, was you shocked as well?
Yeah, I was shocked. Yeah, once again, it's well, the thing is, the reason why it's shocking as well is because you've got this person who's portrayed in a particular way, and this person right now seems to be like the most, has now, just because, I mean, let's just break it down, because she's pregnant. Like, so because she's pregnant, she's got another life form in her. She's got it's almost like it's a second chance that she can, aim for, to leave this bad life behind her, which is kind of like portrayed to that. So when it does bust open, it just reminds you once again, like I said, for this episode, everybody that you've met, everybody's telling some form of lie. And that's the thing. So it's actually probably like the saddest and the biggest reveal in this whole thing, where you're just like, oh shit, man. Like the one piece of redemption that I thought I was going to get from this episode, I thought it would have been at least that. And even that ends up being a lie. Because the other thing that you have to take into account is that as fun as this show is, some of the elements or some of the things that they do deal with, which is done in a light-hearted way, even though it's not done intentionally, is still kind of depressing. So you meet this woman who's pregnant, and you're like, oh my god, she's gonna manage to get away, and she's gonna have this, she's gonna have that, and she would never tell a lie if she was pregnant. And if they do catch her when she's pregnant, they're gonna let her go because they can't throw her into prison. So the minute when that thing gets busted open, you're just like, you're just like the rest of them, man. Fucking shoot her. It's just like, fuck it. I'm like, fuck it. Like, I've lost all hope in life now, man. I'm like, you're like, what? How many episodes? 26 episodes? This is the first episode? Oh my gosh. So yeah, so I remember like feeling that and watching it, and then obviously when I rewatched it the second time, just piecing things together and going like, oh, that sucks, man. Like, that they go, or not even just that, but when that thing gets busted open and all the red eye falls out, you're just like, yeah, you can't hook up with Spike now because you're a proper bad person.
You're tainted.
Yeah.
Tainted goods. Wear the scarlet
So-
letter.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's true. It does. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's that last little bit of kind of redemption that you were hoping for is gone. And speaking of depression, I mean, like the way this episode kind of comes to an end as well is just like crazy. I mean, so Asimov and Katerina have gotten away on this vehicle that they've hijacked. Spike has jumped into the Swordfish and is chasing after them, and they're trying to head for the border. Basically, the border in this show, because it's a sci-fi show, is outer space. So they're heading towards the outer rim of the kind of domed world that A was describing earlier on. And you find out that there's a whole heap of police that are waiting for them at the border. And, you can see what we're shown the inside of their spacecraft, of Asimov and Katerina's spacecraft. And Asimov kind of yells at Katerina for losing all of the red eye. And you can see kind of the genuine kind of shock and hurt on her face when he does that. Because obviously this is somebody that she's trusted a great deal and, has thought of as a certain way. And then he's shown a completely different side to himself. But by this point, as, Richard mentioned earlier, he was kind of hooked on his own supply. And that's like anybody, any drug dealing movie you ever watch, rule one is always never get high on your own supply. And Asimov breaks that rule pretty early on and is now kind of strung out inside of this ship. As they're heading towards what looks like it's going to be certain death for them, basically. And Rich, I mean, just describe kind of those final scenes, really, where they go up against the inevitable, really, in confronting the police in space.
Well, it's one. I mean, it's once again, it's the whole show or the whole episode is just broken down into moments. So you've got basically, them basically trying to head for the border. And then you've got Spike trying to chase them and catch them, and before they head to the border and before they run into the police as well. And it's kind of just like you're trying to think of like how it's going to end because you've just been hit by the reveal that obviously that Katerina is not really pregnant. So and she's lied, and so that makes her now 100% a bona fide villain. So you're like, oh shit, what's going to happen now? Is Spike chasing them because he's after the bounty, or is he chasing them because of her, because of Katerina? Because even though she may have lied, is he chasing a dream? Is there something else there that we can't see? And so I do like that thing that he's just like we don't know what he's doing his job for. Is it for personal gain, or is it actually for the love of the job, or for the job that he has to do? And do you want me to talk about the last scene where basically it all comes to a head, Jay?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So basically what happens is that Asimov is about to take the red eye one final time because he's just obviously in some form of bad come down and he's jacked up. And as far as he's concerned, he's prepared to, to have this final Mexican standoff against the police, who are basically telling him to slow down, shut off the engine, and basically we're going to arrest you. And as Asimov is like basically putting this red eye into his own eye to get another hit. He's also berating Katerina about how she's lost half the supply and everything, and how she's loose and everything. And then she just sees this shell of a man. And this is one of the things that I said about this show that works so well, is that you don't need to know somebody's whole backstory. Sometimes you can meet someone and they can tell you, you can see how they act with somebody or to something in 5 minutes, and you can be like, oh well, that person's got a bit of a fucking temper in them, or this person's nice and laid back, or oh, this person's nice and funny, and you just see that in her eyes, she's like, yeah, my life is done. You've lost the plot, and without you, generally, I am nothing. I actually do love you, and I'm looking at these police, and if they catch us, they're only going to separate us. We've basically been on this journey our whole life, and so if it started together, let's end it together. And she shoots him, bang, just like that, and it's just the shock of just like, wow, she just shot this guy, her own partner, and then you're kind of thinking to yourself, is she doing it to basically, just get rid of him, and then she's going to hand herself into the police, and she basically just looks at Spike, and she just says adios, and there's that once again the whole thing that's running through this episode. It's moments because Spike is just there, and he has a moment to say something to her before she even says adios, and he doesn't take it. It's just that his mouth is just open, and he kind of knows what she's intending to do, and she shoots herself. And so in between that moment of when he can say something, she says adios, and she pulls the trigger, there's that thing of like what could have been, and we'll never know. And like I said, as much as fun as this show is, there's always that slight depressing feeling of like, shit, could I have done better today, or could I have done better in something like that? Because essentially he's got the job done, but this has affected him in a personal way. And so that final scene is like, I just love it. And I remember when I was watching the commentary, and the guys basically talking about how when she shoots the gun, and then the police end up shooting the ship that Katerina's dead body and Asimov are in, the way how the glass shatters and you see everything just floating about, it looks like a flower blossoming, and it's almost kind of like this is a new beginning for her. Like she's just taken this wrong path, her and her partner, and in doing the right thing, or the best thing in that moment, she's now been, now living a new life. And I was just like, that's some pretty fucking poetic shit right there, considering that she just shot her partner, and she's now been shot to pieces, and the ship's been shot to pieces by the police, and she could have, like, maybe had another life with a guy who just seems pretty cool from what we've seen in this episode. And I nearly cried.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's very emotional in the way it kind of plays out, and it's not the ending we necessarily would have hoped for, but it is I guess poetic justice in a sense, for what these two characters have been through, and where they were going and the path they were taking. It was only really going to end one way, and ending it in that way is a very kind of brave thing to do from a creative point of view, because it doesn't give you kind of the happy ending that you would have thought that this story might have been aiming for. So yeah, kudos to them, man. It was beautifully done. Alf, how about you, man? How did you feel about that final scene?
Yeah, it's kind of it's not the ending you'd expect, but it actually all makes sense. Like her putting Asimov out of his misery, I guess, to save him the whole kind of hassle when he least expects it as well. Just to end him there, it's like probably the best thing for him. And she's got him in her arms before obviously the police fire upon her. And yeah, it totally makes sense. There was no other way out. So she ended it for him, and then she faced the consequences herself head on. And although it's kind of like you'd rather see, like normally you'd expect to see like the heroes of the story, Jet and Spike, catch their bounty. Oh, great, they've got money now. The end. This does not do that at all. And I think one of the reasons why it doesn't do that is because it goes into, because obviously we get the kind of bell peppers and beef joke again at the end, and it kind of goes into it's circular. It happens all the time. You know what I mean? They go and do a job, it doesn't go right. No bell peppers and beef, but we're gonna say it's bell peppers and beef just because it's better to eat it. You know what I mean? Thinking that, then eat the crappy food and realize, that it's not bell peppers and beef. So it's kind of like we're seeing that for the first time, but this happens all the time. You know what I mean? So it just goes round in a circle, right? That's what their lives are like as cowboys, as bounty hunters. So yeah, that ending makes sense in regards to the bigger picture, and it just also just makes sense motivation wise, and it's very mature, like, and it's very brave to tell a story like that and give his. It's a shock ending like the first time you see it, but it is an ending that does totally make sense. Kind of like the more times like you watch, or if you kind of like understand the character motivations and whatnot. But yeah, it's just a good kind of like, I'm going to compare it to, how the movie Dread was kind of like a day in the life of.
Yeah, yeah.
This is kind of like that. We're seeing the day in the life of Spike and Jet, and this is just the kind of shit that goes down. You know what I mean? So to us, it's something quite major, but this is normal. This is real life for them. It's like this is normal. It's shocking still, because Spike is still shocked when it happens, when he sees it happen, and notice that she had to take him out. But they see shit like this all the time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, we've kind of gone through the episode, so we'll quickly run through some of the homages and stuff, and I'll see how many of them made sense to you or popped out to you. So this is stuff that I've been able to pull up online. Listeners, if you wanted to go and check these things out for yourself, there's a really good wikia that I found, which is called Bebopopedia. Which is just basically everything related to Cowboy Bebop, including the background behind some episodes and kind of the references and stuff. So one of the things that we touched on, of course, was the references to Desperado, which was a key kind of influence on this episode. There's actually a specific action scene where you guys probably remember this, where Spike confronts a car full of people. And he's the people are trying to shoot him, and he's kicking like sort of the guns out of their hands and things like that. That's actually apparently a direct kind of takeoff of the scene where, remember Danny Trejo's kind of assassin character with the knives,
on top of the carved knives.
Yeah. So basically that's a direct reference to that. The character, as we said, Asimov Sorensen is based on or named after the sci-fi author Isaac Asimov. Asimov and Katarina's death apparently is highly inspired by Arthur Penn's old film Bonnie and Clyde.
Okay.
The two of them were kind of right down to the ending where they die in this sort of hail of bullets from the police. All of that was taken from Bonnie and Clyde, which is quite clever. And the poncho that Spike wears when he's in Tijuana was apparently a reference to Clint Eastwood's character from the Sergio Leone movies, The Man with No Name. So it's actually like kind of hinting that Spike is very similar to this type of character, which makes a lot of sense. As I said, once the series kind of goes on, you get that sense for sure. So yeah, I mean, those are the main kind of takeaways there. Was there anything else that you guys kind of spotted that we didn't cover?
No, that was it. I think that pretty much covered it all. But I mean, anybody who's listening, you literally just think about it like this is only the first episode. So you've got X amount of homages and a shit hot story with shit hot characters. Like if you have, like we've said before, if you haven't watched this show yet, this podcast alone should make you go and watch it. Like just go and do it. Go to, it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix right now. Literally just go and peep it, man. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who's listening, make sure you go and check out the show. As Rich said, it is available on Netflix, so you can get it there. And I believe some intrepid person has uploaded the whole series on YouTube as well, so you can probably find them on YouTube if you prefer. But yeah, Netflix is definitely a good way to enjoy the show because you'll get it in great picture quality too. So yeah, go and check that out, man. All right, well, let me just do some admin before we say our goodbyes. So first off, for those of you who are finding us for the first time, welcome. We also have another podcast that we run simply called Wulong Talks. Make sure you go and check that out. You'll find that exactly where you found this podcast. We're available all over podcast catchers as well. So you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher. Will soon be available on Spotify as well. We're just waiting for a response on that, and we should be up on there too. And will be available on the new Google podcast app as well, which was announced this week. So if you are somebody who is going to use that app, then make sure you check us out there too. We also need to say a big shout out to the Britpod scene crew. As you know, we're part of the Britpod scene, or for those of you that don't know, we are part of that too. Wulong Talks features on there regularly, as well as this podcast. So if you're interested, go and find out a bit more about the Britpod scene, because there's loads of other podcasts there that are available to you. So whatever your tastes are in, you'll find something that reflects it within the Britpod scene for sure. So go and check that out. Also must say a big thank you as well to Rob Wade and the crew from Emotionally 14. If you're listening to us on the Emotionally 14 channel, please let us know as well, so we can feed that back to Rob and let him know how well this is going. Emotionally 14 is a really great website. Lots of good podcasts on there as well. There's some really good curated stuff that Rob has put together there, as well as the podcasts that he features in himself as well, such as the Crazy Train and the E14 Gaming Cast as well. So especially if you're a gamer, make sure you go and check him out. It's definitely worth a visit. And finally as well, we just want to say thank you to our friend Nigel from Mayamada, the t-shirt and anime brand. Well, they produce mangas. He's doing a great job at the moment in getting together a special volume of his work, which is available via Kickstarter. So you would just need to make a pledge to Kickstarter and you'd be able to get a copy of that. It's really, really brilliant. Go and check it out. Go to their website to find out more, which is www.mayamada.com. Okay, I think that's going to wrap it up for us, boys. So we'll put a nail in this one and consider session 1 done. We'll have session 2 up for you very soon, so make sure you get watching on session 2 as well. And make sure you get in touch with us too. We do have an email address that you can holler at us at, which is the Bebop Rewatch @gmail.com. And we also have a Facebook page as well, so make sure you go and like that. The Facebook is just simply called the Bebop Rewatch, so you'll find us there. And as usual, you can holler at us on Twitter as well at Wulong Talks. Okay, Richie, where can people find you at?
On Instagram, you can find me under Rich Reviews. And then obviously we've got the joint one. So we've got Wulong Talks. And then also the Instagram accounts basically accompanying this new podcast, which is called the Bebop Rewatch. We've also got some Vero accounts set up. So I'm under Rich Reviews as well, and I think Jay's on there as well, which I can tell you in a second, which we started to use. So if there's any people up there who've created a Vero account and need some friends or need some content to try and chase up, give us a shout, because we're going to try and use that as well. So that's something to take into account.
For sure, yeah. My one on there, I think is J Easy Peasy. I can't remember, like it's one of the things I've created so many socials now, I can't remember what's what, but yeah, I think it's J Easy Peasy. So yeah, if you're a Vero user, make sure you go and check us out. Big A, thanks for joining us, man, on this first episode. As said, we had to have you on here because it just wouldn't be the same without you. Where can people find you at?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Big A85GL.
Wicked, nice and simple. All right, we're gonna go. So let's end this thing on a high and say goodnight to you all. Hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you come back next week, because as I said, we'll have session 2 available for you soon as well. And we'll see you, Space Cowboys and Cowgirls. Say goodnight, Rich.
Adios.
Hey, nice. And Alvin, say goodnight.
Good night.
And we're out of here, people. Peace.